Hey, this is Chad with Drawn and Cornered. It is the last day of November, November 30th, 2021, and here is the news that you need for the day. First off, Joe Biden came on TV last night and talked about Omicron, the newest variant of COVID, what they were planning on doing about it, how worried we should be about it, and so on. And though he did a relatively good job of tamping down, we don't know very much right now, but we are looking to be an overabundance of caution and yada, yada, yada. He also mentioned that he wouldn't be interested in lockdowns if everybody vaccinated and masked properly. Well, we already know that people aren't going to vaccinate and mask properly. We've seen that over the course of Delta. We saw that with the original one. There's a subset of people that are unwilling to vaccinate or really don't want to be forced to vaccinate or sort of resistant to it in general. And there are people that are just done with the masks. And you can quibble over whether or not masks are useful and how useful and in what situations they're useful, but we know that that's not there. So if that setup, if people mask and vaccinate properly, we won't have to do lockdowns again, sounds a little bit like a threat. I think you're seeing this in the right light. That absolutely is a threat. It is meant to be a threat. The vaccine mandates, the masking requirements, the lockdowns that Joe Biden can impose on both federal lands and with federal employees and in different regions as far as pressure that he can put on the governors, that is absolutely a threat. 100%. And they will talk about how effective these threats and specifically these laws and these mandates can be around pushing us forward out of COVID. But the other thing that he also mentioned is that this is just something that's going to come here. He said essentially the travel bans that he's created will not stop Omicron from coming here. Hopefully it just slows it down a little bit. So he's recognizing what seems to be an inevitability at this point, that COVID is something that we will have to deal with routinely. The variants will happen and they will come through. The good news is that typically in viruses, the variants are less lethal. They are less problematic than the initial iterations. And ultimately, they might be more transmissible, which there's the possibility that this one is, the same way that Delta was. But they will also be less lethal because the virus wants to keep the host alive so that it can replicate and hit as many people as possible. Sort of like what the cold is. The cold is will travel through entire populations, but it won't kill a whole lot of people. And COVID probably will trend in that same direction. But it's important that Joe Biden keeps you scared. It's important that Joe Biden keeps you thinking that COVID is a front of mind type of issue so that he can push forward a bunch of agenda items, specifically in the Build Back Better plan, that need COVID to be a big problem in order to have any sort of impetus or purpose towards solving that problem. So recognize how those two things are pretty disparate, but we still don't know. In fact, the scientist that actually found, the doctor that found this new Omicron variant, she said herself, we haven't really seen extreme cases here. Everything's been pretty mild. We don't know that this is either more transmissible or more lethal or more problematic. Nothing we've seen has shown it to be that, so we'll wait and see. She expects to have those results and kind of know what all of these cases are going to look like in a fairly short amount of time. So she urged caution towards getting too panicky about this because nothing has shown that this is a panicky variant. But still countries are panicking. Still countries are shutting down across the board. They are reducing travel, disallowing travel, requiring significant amounts of testing and quarantining if you are traveling. It's just everybody's gone into full hysterics again, but we don't even know if we have to. So we'll see what happens with Omicron. Probably nothing, but that doesn't mean that it won't be useful politically for certain people, organizations, parties to just completely exaggerate it a little bit. The other story we want to talk about, which I think is actually turning into more of a story about the media than it is about the act itself, was the killings in Waukesha, the individual who drove through a parade intentionally at this point, seemingly, to hurt people, calling it specifically not a terrorist attack. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about terrorism being specifically for political and ideological motives. Sure, maybe that case is maybe he's not terroristic, he's just insane and awful. Fine. But he's absolutely the owner of that action. And the problem with what the media has been purporting. So Charlottesville, you'll remember this, the Unite the Right rally where an individual drove into the crowd of anti-protesters, killing Heather Heyer, and used his car as a missile to hurt a lot of people. This is the same circumstance, but the way that Charlottesville was handled was an attack by an individual using a car. The way that Waukesha is being handled is a car that crashed into people. And there's been, CNN got lambasted for this. A bunch of other organizations that have reported this in that sort of deceiving way have gotten lambasted for this, even from the left, which shows you just how double standardy this type of thing is. But we're not hearing as much as you would expect to hear about this individual's social media background. Some of the things he said, very anti-white, very just hateful type speech. And that would lead me to believe that this could be an ideological attack. This could be a terrorist attack. This could be the sort of thing that falls into that line. And if you remember, a couple of years back, we had an RV explosion in the middle of downtown. RV said that it was going to explode, and it ended up not killing anybody, but kind of just being a nuisance. I think it was on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve. Really weird event. And everybody was really quick to jump on terrorism. And I was resistant to that because we didn't really know what the guy's motives were. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't have any background on it, but terrorism was splashed across the headlines immediately. This case, we don't see that. We see actually resistance to that idea. It is not terrorism. But now that we have social media posts and things he said, and we still are unwilling to at least talk about whether or not this is terrorism, seems strange. And if you think it has something to do with the color of the perpetrator, I don't think that's necessarily wrong. That may have something to do with it. This doesn't fit into a nice white supremacist, old white dude narrative of being the biggest threat to the United States. So maybe it just doesn't get any recognition at all. And I think that's a problem. And it's something that we need to be cognizant of as you see the media reporting on this, pushing it off on the SUV, pushing it off on a crash instead of an attack. This is an attack. It's a vicious, awful attack that has now killed 6 people, injured dozens, and perhaps might have some more victims coming forward, as I know at least a couple of the folks were still in critical condition. And kids, if there's anything that we should be able to unite behind, it's the fact that this guy is a dirtbag. And we need to find out exactly why he did what he did and judge him for it. And hopefully we can come together on that. That's all I have for you today. This is Chad with Drawn and Cornered. We do videos like this every day with a little bit of news, a little bit of analysis, nice bite-sized morsel just to get you started. If you like that sort of thing, subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell so you get notifications every time we release a video, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We will see you on the weekends if anything big happens. If you have any questions, comments, criticisms, think I'm totally crazy, leave that comment down below. Thank you very much for that. Again, this is Chad with Drawn and Cornered, and I will see you again tomorrow.